Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wisdom Seeker Live. Glad to have you here with us today. Hope that as you join, that you'll be sure to let us know where you're joining from, and especially look forward to hearing from you through comments and questions and engagement. And as always, like to talk about for Wisdom Seeker Live, what we consider uh, the concept of wisdom. And we are wisdom for us is a three-step process, and it is a journey, if you will. And it begins with knowledge. And knowledge is something that we gain, facts, figures, information, hopefully on a regular basis, and both formally and informally. And then the next step in the journey or process towards wisdom is to gain understanding. And we gain understanding by taking the knowledge we have and making it part of our life and applying it in our life to situations that we're encounter, and use it to solve problems and find solutions. And then we hopefully take the next step, which is really the more critical step, and that is step into wisdom. And what makes the difference with wisdom is that when we step into wisdom, we see things from a much bigger perspective, including seeing outside of ourselves or without a focus on ourselves, and gain an understanding and insight into the idea that what we do, what we say, how we choose doesn't just affect us, but it affects others as well. And for those of us of a spiritual bent, the way we kind of express it is that we want to see things through God's eyes. So that's what the wisdom journey is about for wisdom seekers, and hope that you will join us to be a wisdom seeker as well. Welcome, Jeremy, and welcome, Eunice. Glad to have you with us today. And today's topic is one that I was kind of inspired about. Recently saw on LinkedIn a little video clip, and I think everybody's probably seen these, but there are little, I don't know, little toys that are battery operated, and they, if you place coins on them, depending on the number of coins or whatever, will determine the speed that which they function or move. And this particular one, the upshot of the message for this video was that the more you move up in ranks, if you will, or advance along in a career, that the less that hard you have to work. And I appreciate on some level why people would feel that way and why that perspective might be out there. But what concerns me is that if we perpetuate that we are creating a problem by dividing people with an us against them mentality. And the reality, I think, is quite different. And having been at multiple levels of in the workplace over the years, I've been the newest, youngest, most inexperienced in a company, and then I have gone so far as to be a C-suite level executive, including being a CEO of my own company, COO of other companies, and so on. So I've been at all the various levels. Welcome, Karen. Glad to have you as always. So I've seen work from a variety of different levels, positions, roles, titles, whatever you think of. And I appreciate that there is a perception, and we unfortunately kind of focus in on this perception that if you're in the C-suite or in the upper level of a company, you don't have to work as hard, and that it's the poor frontline people that are the ones that are doing all the hard work. And again, I appreciate the concept, the context of that, but I want to challenge that as a mindset, because I don't think that it's a wise mindset to have, because when we take that approach, it pits people against each other. And that concerns me, because at the end of the day, and this is something that any of you have watched this show, know anything about me, when it comes to our value, we are all equally priceless in value. Our value, our worth is not tied into our roles and positions and titles and things like that. So want to take that one off the table. And therefore, to me, that should be a great equalizer for all of us. Keep us from one of us thinking more highly of ourselves than others. So want to take that one off the table, if you will, for discussion. So the question becomes, do we in different roles work harder or less hard based on those roles? And more importantly, should we get a mindset about that somehow life is easier or better for those that are in those C-suite or upper level leadership roles? And my concern is, I don't think that, first of all, that it's a good mindset, because again, it tends to divide us. It tends to pit us against each other, which is not a good place to be. Second of all, I don't think it's accurate. That's part of my concern as well, that let's get correct and accurate information. Eunice has a comment. Personal knowledge of God helps us to build a wisdom mindset. Indeed. And that's what this podcast is about, is to approach everything from wisdom, so that as we look, we don't just base it purely on facts and figures, and we don't just base it on our own personal experience, but that we begin to base our thinking, our mindsets, our choices based on that bigger picture of wisdom, in that we see how we influence, affect others, not just ourselves, by the decisions that we make. And as we begin to do that, we will begin to get a better perspective and make wiser choices. So this whole thing about if you are at a higher level in a company, your work is easier. And in some regards, depending on the type of work you do, that could probably be argued from a physical work standpoint, in that it is not common that upper level leadership would be doing frontline types of physical work, if that's the type of job it is. But what I hope that we can begin to think about, and again, having been in all these different situations, is that there is another part of work that comes into play. And it's unfortunately been lost to some degree in our current culture, because it's not part of what we prioritize, but it's the big R word of responsibility. And what we need to remember is, if you're in a role and you do move up, you may be less physically demanded upon in your new role, but at the end of the day, you're carrying a greater responsibility. Now, that's assuming that you're approaching that role and status in a proper way. But at the end of the day, that responsibility grows, and therefore the hardness of our work or our toil, or however you want to look at it, doesn't diminish, and life doesn't automatically become easy as we move up in our positions in our careers. And the more that all of us can understand that that situation, we are less likely to get an attitude and have a divisive mindset, an us against them kind of mentality. And I see this in so many different organizations, both personally, you see it in community and church organizations, you see it in workplace, and we even see it in the military, that it is not uncommon to have us against them mindset. And it's an unhealthy, unwise place to be. And additionally, quite often it is because the mindset or perspective is taken out of context. It's reached unwisely. It's reached based on just theoretical knowledge or even maybe limited understanding. And so what we need to really do is become wise as we look at this and consider it. Because when we look at an organization, if we understand that at every level of the organization, hopefully everyone contributes in their own way, in a way that is needed, and that anyone in the organization, if something happens and they're not able to be there or do what they are there to do, then there is a problem. You're missed, you're needed, and therefore you should be valued. Again, I know in organizations and culturally we have come to a place where we want to add prestige to the people in the C-suite offices and things like that. And I get that, but I don't think that's healthy either. And one of the things that we are learning more and more as time goes on is that people that are in those upper level roles that somehow think they are more important or should be valued more because of their position, that is an unfortunate mindset that's out there. And I would challenge, as a leadership coach and trainer, that people with that mindset, even if they have a leadership title, they need to consider that that's not leadership. That's not the mindset of an effective leader. Excuse me. The mindset of an effective leader is humility and recognizing everyone else's value in the process. And it comes under the term, by the way, of servant leadership. So what are the implications of this mindset of us against them? Well, first of all, it creates distrust. If we're always thinking that the people that are in the upper levels of our organization are just in it because they want prestige or they're after ease of life and work, then we're going to be distrusting. We're going to always question their motivation. They're doing this just for their own good so that they make more money or whatever. And when we step back and realize that that at every level there is a hardness to work in those levels, and I don't care what level it is, because having again been in the various levels throughout organizations, I understand what it means and what it's like. In some ways, I would suggest, as a business owner and being the boss, if you will, that I work as harder in that role than I ever did when I was working for someone else and even in a frontline or entry level position. Now, the responsibilities change and the type of work will vary. And yes, when you move up in an organization, good possibility that your role might be less physically demanding in terms of physical movement, hard work, whatever. But as you move up, assuming that you do this well, that your responsibility grows greater and the load, if you will, mentally and emotionally becomes remarkable. When you are in the C-suite level and you're always concerned with, are people going to get paid? Are we taking care of the needs of our people? And so on. And so this thing of well, the people at the top got it easy. It's not so. And to approach it with a mindset that somehow they, the people other than us, have it easier or better is an unwise way to look at things. It is an unwise mindset. So as we go forward, I really encourage us all to seek wisdom in this situation and seek to understand rather than compare, and therefore become divided, become distrusting of other people because somehow they've got it easier than we do. And as part of this whole process, one would bring up the question about money. And yes, as you move up in your career, move into different roles and positions, the theory is that you will be paid more. And I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, having more money adds some options and in some regards makes life easier, quote unquote. But along with that becomes greater responsibility, assuming that you're approaching it correctly. So again, this idea that some others work harder than others is a dangerous comparison, and it really creates a divided mindset and creates challenges for the entire organization. And and one could argue, okay, so who is the cause of this mindset? Well, I think there's plenty of blame to go around. I know that at the end of the day, and just so you understand my perspective on leadership, if there's any problem in an organization, it's always a leadership problem, because it's the leader's responsibility to make sure that things are done well, even the things that need to be done by others. And that's a challenge, and that's a whole nother topic for another day. And the level of wisdom needed to be in those roles is very demanding. And I just would dare say that anyone that gets in that role and does not seek wisdom is looking for trouble and creating situations where they're going to have problems, even unnecessarily, because they approach it unwisely. But I just hope that we can begin to influence this mindset that's out there. And this is where we all come in, is when people start acting as though and trying to promote this idea that frontline workers have it worse and they work harder, and that's the design of the system, and therefore are put upon more, and the people in the upper part of leadership in an organization have it easier and life's good. And it really isn't. I will tell you, having been around many people at those levels, the life is not easier. It is not better necessarily. And one of the things that experience in those levels of leadership or management, whatever term you want to use, is that people in those roles are finding out that everybody wants to make money, having money the ticket. Well, they've got money, and they come to find out that the money doesn't take care of what they're looking for and what we're all looking for either. So it is a matter of getting a wiser perspective on these roles and positions. Welcome, Z. Glad to have you this morning. I always look forward to your comments and inputs. So this whole mindset of us against them, the little people against the big people, the looking at others and saying, well, because they're this role or title, that somehow they've got easier life. And most of the time, you'll find that it is not the case, that that these people don't have an easier life. They may not have as many physical demands on them that others have, but they carry a level of responsibility that's greater than most. Let's see. Karen has a comment. Says, unfortunately, the reality is that not all organizations have C-suite's mindset of servant leadership. Karen, you are very correct, and it is a challenge that is pervasive. I will agree with you 100%. And it's part of what is causing us to face some interesting challenges and questions in the workforce coming up. And for those of you who are interested, I have an article out and it's on my profile, and it's called Perfect Storm in the Workforce. And I address some of these questions and concepts in that, and how that lack of leadership at many levels in organizations is going to create some big problems for that organization because of the way people are treated in the organization, and how unwise the roles are filled, and the people in them are unwise in their approach. And they certainly, as you mentioned, aren't ascribing to the servant leadership type of perspective. So thank you for that comment, Karen. Appreciate it. The other thing that's rather interesting, and this is something that we hear, and part of the reason I think we have this us against them mindset, is that we have a lot of people in the workforce that are in their very role in the organization, their work is not aligned with who they are. And so as a result, that adds a level of hardness. I don't care who you are doing what job, is if you dislike what you're doing, if it doesn't suit who you are, that work is going to seem extra hard. You know, there is a saying out there, and it's got a lot of merit to it. And that saying is that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And so again, an element in this conversation and looking and comparing comes down to, are you situated and suited in your job or your task or your role? Are you doing what you are designed to do with the purpose that you have discovered for yourself? And if not, I don't care what level you're at, you're going to work hard because the entire concept of that work is hard to you. And so don't be surprised at feeling like you have to work harder than everybody else. And in those cases, that is not anything to do with role, position, title, or anything else. That has to do with a misalignment that we have in these roles, and it causes our work to feel very hard. Back when I was teaching, I used to teach a variety of different positions, if you will, or different trades. And one of the things that was always fascinating to me is I would have students come to me and say, Mr. Ward, is this work hard? And I always had to say, well, that depends on whether or not you're doing the work that you are designed to do and is aligned with your purpose and your vision for what you want to be about. Because I watched some people, for example, one of the trade areas that I would teach in school was masonry. And I would have people say, oh, that's too much hard work. It gets dirty and things like that. But then I had other people, and it's funny because it wasn't defined by gender, size, or any of those things. But I would have other people look at it and say, oh, this is the best thing ever. I enjoy doing it. It's not especially hard to me because I enjoy doing it. And so the mindset and the concept of hardness of work has its own challenges. And so therefore, if we are trying to make broad stroke evaluation and make the comment that somehow people in the C-suite levels have it better than those at the front line and beginning or ground level of the organization, it's an unhealthy mindset. It is damaging to ourselves, because when we compare and look at things in that fashion, we'll never win. We'll always be in a losing proposition. And then it's also bad because of how it affects the relationships in the organization, the culture. And that mindset can drive toxicity in an organization as much as anything out there. Let's see. Jeremy has a comment. He says, those in a higher position usually are under extreme stress. Some share the insight with those under them. However, also make it a part of their responsibility to do the work with those in under them. This shows them under us that we have hardships just like them. However, we bear the load together as a team versus letting the chaos divide the team. That is so true, Jeremy. The mindset that we approach this in makes a massive difference. If we decide that somehow we are working harder or being demanded of greater, then our mindset is going to not be in a good place. And we're going to always be dissatisfied because we feel like that somehow them, those above us or higher in the organization, however you prefer to look at it, are always out for themselves and things like that. And yes, those in those positions that are in upper leadership, management, whatever term, don't help when they make choices and behaviors that perpetuate that mindset, such as a sense or feeling that they are too good to do something or be with certain groups of their organization, whatever. And so again, there's blame to go around. And ultimately, if there is a problem or a mindset issue in an organization, the problem ultimately falls on the shoulder of the leadership of that organization. And that goes all the way to the top. And so complaining about it and making noise about it, first thing any real leader does, if there's a problem on their team, in their organization, company, whatever, I always tell them your first stop is always in front of the mirror. What is your role in why that is the way it is, and what is your role in figuring out how to resolve it? So I get that, and I am very big on it. But when someone that is working for me looks at me and they want to say, well, you've got it easier and your life is better or whatever, I want to say, no, it's not true. That it is different, as a leader, your role and tasking is different, but it doesn't mean that it's easier and therefore you work less hard. You may work less hard physically, but when you start carrying responsibilities mentally and emotionally, the hardness of your job become great. I think it's interesting, having taught leadership, field leadership, that I'm speaking of, people that are on the front line as leaders. And it is very common among those people, because of the level of responsibility involved and the hardness of that part of things. It is not uncommon to say, well, then just let me go sweep the floors or clean the bathrooms or whatever, because the pressure and hardness of being responsible for others carries its own challenges, and therefore makes the job, if you will, harder by its very nature. Yes, they may not do as much physical labor in that role, but it doesn't mean their job has become easy. And the more we can, as a society, as a culture, begin to understand that perspective and try to get away from the us against them mentality, the more effective we're going to be in our organizations, and the better our cultures are going to be for all of us. A healthier culture, if you will, that does not demonstrate this bias of, well, you're better, you've got it easier, whatever type mindset. And that is a choice, by the way. That mindset is a choice that each of us makes. And we control that perspective. That is our choice. It is the one of the things that we actually truly can control on some level, and that is our attitude and our mindset. Welcome, Richard, to glad to have you, and I appreciate your making a comment. Richard says it's okay to make noise. It just has to be a different one, and be prepared to defend it kindly. Maybe having some technical difficulties, having issues. Please be patient. Looks like maybe internet connection is a bit challenged. And so anyway, we each have a choice to make in our own perspective about things. And that goes a long way towards avoiding this us against them mentality. I know another way this comparison occurs and how it creates this us against them mentality is that we don't understand what the amount of time involved, because there are people that say, well, I'm working 40 and 50 and even 60 hours a week of hard labor, doing physical things, and it's very demanding, and it may very well be true. But when you look at a leader at any level and think that, well, they get to take long lunches and go on trips, and there's some truth to that. But even with those, it carries responsibility, and there can be a pretty heavy load from those responsibilities when we fully understand them and take that into account. As a business owner or as a C-suite level person in an organization, I have put in as many or more hours than the people that reported to me over years. The opportunity or option to turn off the job is a big challenge. Again, this is assuming that the leader or person in that role does that role well. If not, that's different, and it's not a wise approach to compare to others that aren't doing things well. It's not the problem of the system design at that point. That's a problem with the individual not seeking to be excellent in what they do. So let's be real careful with this us against them approach to things. And I hope that as we consider this, we will avoid promoting these stereotypical or perceived approaches or mindsets about who works harder. Is it the guy out there on the front line? In fact, I work with the electrical industry, and one would say, well, the new guy is always the hardest worker. Not necessarily. We have to be careful what we define as being hard, because what is hard for me may or may not be hard for you. And to assume that because you do something more physical than I do, that it's easier and life's better, is an unwise approach. What we should begin to do is to look at the principle of wisdom. What's the bigger picture here? What's involved with the person that I'm looking to? First of all, don't need to be comparing, because comparing is an unhealthy, unwise way to do things. this thing of, well, the grass is greener on the other side kind of thought, or everybody's got it better than me. That's a bad way to approach things. That's an unwise way to approach things. Secondly, is to consider, okay, yeah, it may be that they don't have to dig a ditch or sweep the floor or whatever that task is that somehow makes them less important or harder work or whatever. But do they get to walk away and leave their job during the day, whereas someone in a leadership role, where's their responsibility? Where's that job nonstop? Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, which is fine. Encourage people to consider it. But being an entrepreneur is not this easy street kind of thing that most of those that are trying to become an entrepreneur think it is. Being an entrepreneur is very hard work, takes a lot to do, and it's a lot of responsibility. So again, what is hard work? And is there any role in an organization, generally speaking, that is absent of having hardness to the work involved? Again, there are times, and speaking in the electrical trades, we kind of talk about if you're in a role of leadership, sometimes we want to say, give me a shovel, give me a broom. I would rather do that than carrying the responsibility and load that I carry as a leader. So as we look around, I hope that each of us will consider our mindset. And are we getting caught up in the trap of comparing ourselves to others in different roles and looking at them and say, well, they don't have to work as hard. Their life is easier. They've got more money than I do. And so on, the list goes on. And when we get that mindset, the problem is it doesn't just affect us, because we begin to promote a wrong concept, and that is that them that we're against somehow are mistreating us. And it's not true. Each level of what we do has its own level of responsibility, whether it's more physical, mental, emotional, whatever. We just need to recognize, more importantly, that in any organization, that each of us have a valuable place, and that we individually have value, not based on what we do for that organization, not what we do in our community. Our value is established. So moving up in an organization and getting more roles and titles and letters after your name do not change your value as a human being. That's already established. And so when we let go of that, then we are gaining wisdom and begin to look at life more wisely, so that we can then consider, okay, if my value is not at stake in this situation, then what do I need to be looking at? And as we look, and when we start trying to compare, we need to say, well, first of all, I don't need to compare, because I don't know what that other individual is dealing with. I can see external things. I can consider, are they having to sweat as much in their job? But even that is not a complete picture, because none of us watch or are around other people all the time. And to make a judgment, especially that will affect our mindset and our relationship based on that, is unwise, because you don't know what they have or haven't done, what they have or haven't gone through. You don't know whether they are working a lot more hours or whatever. In fact, some people want, again, this comparison thing. Well, they don't have to work as many hours because they're salaried. There's another side to that coin, and that is, if they work more hours than the theoretical normal work time, they don't get paid extra for that. So it's not that one is better or worse. It's different, and we need to understand those differences and appreciate them with our mindset. Let's see here. Z has a comment. Oh goodness, looks like we're having some technical difficulty. I hope it's not carrying over on the side where you guys are. Let's see. Let me check it and see. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to continue on and hope that things are working and that what I'm seeing is not what you're seeing. But Z makes a comment. That's why I said it's important to have transparency from the leader manager. Indeed, it is valuable to have transparency, and that's part of the role and responsibility of the leader, is to have that transparency. Oh my goodness, let me see here. I'm going to try and make an adjustment. It may kick me off, but let's try it and see if we're can overcome what looks to be a technical issue. So hang in there with me if you would. Okay, maybe that's going to take care of it. I hope so anyway. Somebody let me know if you're able to hear me and see the video at this point. I would appreciate it. Let's see here. Jeremy also makes a comment, and that is a way to deal with this issue is to have them shadow you for a day or two to get a little behind the scenes insight on what we face. Indeed, Jeremy, that would be an approach that might help head off some of this mindset of, well, you think I've got it so good, walk in my shoes a bit. What I would tell people is that we may not always have that option or get that option. What I would encourage us to do is to consider that we need to, sorry folks, having again technical issues this morning. But shadowing is another one. But I think the better perspective and the thing we can control is our mindset about what we're observing, and recognizing that if we were to walk in their shoes for a time, that our perspective would be different. Let's see. And Richard makes a comment. It can't work any other way, sir. I appreciate that. It's something that I go back to what I encourage us to do as individuals. Okay. And that is for us to consider our own mindset in regards to this. Are we using a proper mindset in this? And are we indeed approaching it properly? If each of us chooses individually to have a wise approach and mindset and perspective, eventually we change the perception. We also contribute to the solution, because as we do that and we can begin to influence others around us, we can possibly, if there is an issue with leadership, influence that leadership. It's a principle that works, by the way. I've seen it work and applied many times. So we just need to be very careful about perpetuating us against them. It's an unwise perspective. It's an unwise perception. And the reality is it's based in incomplete or unwise thought processes in this regards. And we can demonstrate that, because if the difference is hours that a person puts in, then let's explore the number of hours that people put in. How many hours are they spending versus at one level versus another? And I would I would be willing to say, based on many years of experience and a purposeful approach in this whole concept, because it's a part of leadership, and it's a passion that I have, is to help develop leaders at all levels. And so it is these perceptions that somehow those of us at the lower level of an organization or a team or whatever are having to work harder than those in the upper levels or leadership roles is not accurate most of the time. There are exceptions, of course. There's always exceptions. Someone made a comment in a poll that I did on LinkedIn that because of policies and things, that quite often frontline people were somehow restrained or have harder options or whatever. And I get that, and that's possible in an organization. But I think if we approach things differently and begin to have a wise mindset, a wise perspective, we have a greater chance of causing things to work the way that they need to work and should work without having the, if you will, the toxicity of this us against them mindset. And part of, think of a saying that's out there is that if there's something that needs to change, then we should be the change we want to see. Again, that is a more wise approach to this situation. If you think there's disparity or inequity in the job, don't complain about what others do until you have taken the time to choose, first of all, your own mindset. Second of all, your willingness to change as far as your part in whatever this is. So let's see if we can't figure out ways to avoid us against them. And I would encourage us to affect and influence those around us to hopefully not perpetuate this idea that just because you have a certain title or position or role in an organization, that things are easier. You don't have to work as hard and your life is easier. It's not a wise perspective, because it only takes into account, well, first of all, quite often it's based on what somebody else has said or observed, which is generally speaking an unhealthy approach. We're better off to find out for ourselves and make have a mindset based on what we have found for ourselves. Let's see. I'm sorry. Ask who. Let's see. A manager hardly doesn't show up because in some capacity he was a partner in another organization. There are many layers you hear about, but hardly see the big guy unless in newsletters that show in an email that you don't have time to even read and have been written by lawyers that no one can really understand. So Z, what I'm hearing your comment is that there is poor leadership out there, and you won't get an argument from me in that regard. There are many organizations that have poor leadership, no doubt about it. They are not doing things wisely. They are not approaching leadership in a servant leadership mindset. I can't argue. In fact, I would support your perspective in that regard by all means. But one of the things that as a wisdom seeker we need to begin to develop is an understanding that what others choose to do or even appear to do, whatever, is not something that we should allow to control us. And if we allow them to cause our mindset to be in the wrong place, then that's our problem. It's not one of leadership. It is our problem. And that is where as we grow and as we become wise, we learn the value of taking that responsibility for ourselves and take away the power of someone else to rule and control us because we allow them to establish our mindset. Again, no argument at all from me. One of the big issues that we see in a lot of organizations today is a lack of leadership or effective leadership, and especially a lack of servant leadership, which in my estimation is the only really true leadership out there. But that notwithstanding, my job for me in my life, first of all, is the right mindset. And that mindset needs to be based in wisdom, not in incomplete data, not in incomplete understanding, but in wisdom. Knowing, by the way, that our mindset is the thing, one of the few things that we ultimately control. And when we get to a point where our mindset is not under control of others, including leaders that we report to, then it frees us to then be able to address any questions or concerns in a more wise way. When we get caught up in, well, they don't do their job right, they're not leaders, I mean, any of a number of possible complaints, we are turning over control to them in our life. And as a wise person, that is an unhealthy place to be. Part of the wisdom is for us to realize that others around me don't control me. They can affect me and they impact me with their decisions, but ultimately, if they're controlling me, they're not the problem. I am. It's a challenge that I have to take on and take responsibility for. And when we begin to do that, it frees us an awful lot. In fact, if you want to kind of understand some of what I'm talking about, have an article on LinkedIn called The Cocky Rooster. Go read it. And it's about the journey that I had to go through to realize that looking at others and looking for them as the problem all the time is not a wise or healthy approach. And as we begin to take our focus off on why they're wrong and look at, okay, well, what's my role in this? Things change. May not ever change the other person or the circumstances, but we change our mindset about it. And as we do, then that alone can make that situation better. And so we need to be careful to not look at the problems that are in a given situation, lack of leadership, lack of transparency. Those are all factors, no doubt. But at the end of the day, me, you, and anyone need to approach this from a wise standpoint. And that wisdom helps us understand that things aren't as as they appear, as we think they are. Second of all, at the part of being wise is, okay, what is my responsibility in this situation? We may not be able to change the circumstances, and that makes it challenging, but we can always change our mindset in regards to those circumstances. I believe it's Chuck Swindoll has a quote that's been used quite a lot. It said, life is 10% of what happens to us and 90% of what we do with it. And that is such a key part. And that is, as we begin to take on that mindset, we begin to avoid us against them in our mindset and approach. And as we become free from allowing others to poison us and our mindset, then first of all, it makes quite often will make our circumstances seem and feel very different, including most of the time we will on some level feel better about it, if nothing else, because we don't allow it to control us. And then we can begin to figure out, can I change the circumstances either by control or influence? Or if not, do I need to just accept it? Or do I need to change my circumstances to solve the problem? The challenge is that we have to be real careful that we don't start blaming others and try to change the circumstance and find out we get into a different circumstance with the same mindset and we got the same problem in the new environment, new situation. Welcome, Artan. Glad to have you with us. Hope I pronounced your name correctly. So us against them mindset, bad place to be, bad thing to promote, bad to encourage others to consider that. The wise approach is that we may not know what others are dealing with or going through. And we may find that, yes, they may not be physically working as hard or as much as the person out in the field. But doesn't mean that they invest less hours, doesn't mean that they are working less hard. It's the way they go about doing things and have to do things that makes the difference. So, and again, there are problems in leadership. Anybody knows me knows that I address that. And so I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, I don't want their bad choices, their poor leadership to control me. And the best way to do that is avoid getting in these traps of such as us against them in life. It's not healthy. And by the way, and this trap, if you ascribe to it and behave in it towards management or leadership, you'll do it to each other. And again, not a healthy place to be. So I hope that you will join me in seeking wisdom in your day-to-day life, and in particular per this conversation, before we go to a place of, well, they've got it better, they are not doing right by me, they whatever, that us against them mindset, that we need to check it. And we need to recognize that it is an unwise mindset. There may be some truth to it in terms of circumstance, but if we choose to have a mindset of it's us against them, we're the ones that suffer for it, not them. And we are less likely with that mindset to bring about change that we would want to see. So let's start with us. Let us, as the saying goes, be the change we want to see happen. And when we do that, quite often, that makes our circumstances improve by itself. Or it may be that the key there is you get some wisdom and insight and you go, this is not where I need to be. I need to do something different. But then you got the wisdom and you don't make a choice like that out of frustration or without good decision making. So thanks, everyone. I appreciate you being with us today on the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast. And I hope that you will begin to be able to address in your own life us against them mindset and help be a part to maybe stop that from moving forward and causing problems for all of us. So thank you. See you again next Monday, 8:00 Eastern, and hope that you'll join us, invite others to come along. And if you have an idea of a topic that you would like us to approach to find some wisdom in regard to it, please suggest it, and look forward to seeing you again. God bless. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week on Wisdom Seeker Live podcast. Thanks, everyone.